Welcome to Playing with Fire, the podcast for people who are ready to custom build their love.
We're talking about non-monogamy, however you design it, as an individuation opportunity.
Want to leave the default and make your life spectacularly you? You're in the right place. Hey, Ken, I'm glad we're making time for a conversation I've wanted to have for a while about social monogamy and coming out as non-monogamous.
I am up for this conversation.
I'm glad that you're up for it because I have a feeling that your ears may burn a little bit when we talk about it because
Oh, totally. It throws me
this brings
back.
up some of our tender stuff, right? From the way past. And so I thought we'd maybe start off by just saying it's not up to me. It's not up to you, Ken. It's not up to any of us to decide how someone else structures their relationship or how much privacy they want around their relationship structure. And there's a lot of reasons why you might want privacy. So if you're opening up this episode and you're like, oh shit, she's about to call me out and say that I have to be a certain way.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Let me assure you, if you've been listening for a while, you know that my game is not to tell anybody what to be or how to do your life. And I want to invite us all to consider stuff, right? Yep. Sometimes we make choices because we just don't even know what we don't know, or we act from unconscious fear. And I think there's a big difference between the conscious fear that comes up when we think about coming out as non-monogamous, being out as non-monogamous, being public about it. There's a big difference between being consciously worried, having legitimate concerns that you've thought through and you're like, yes, this is what worries me, versus just feeling like, you know what, that's I don't want to be different, and so I'm just not going to think about it.
Just not going to say the things or address it.
And in that, we can have, first off, unconscious fear might be running the show, and that actually can come out sideways in lots of ways. So I don't want you to be running unconscious fear as your background program, but also you may find at some point that you are faced with being outed or feeling like, oh, somebody needs to know this now, or somebody found out accidentally. And so I want us to have been proactive and thought through how do we want to handle that? So that's why we're having this conversation. It's not to tell you you need to do this a certain way. It's to educate you and get you ready for what might come up when and if the time comes that you want to be out. Okay, I'm off my initial soapbox.
There we go. So that's our goal here. And so, coming out conversations and social monogamy, where shall we start?
Well, I think we could start by just talking about the fact that default monogamy, the expectation of monogamy. Let's talk about what that is a little bit, because monogamy, if you go from a zoological perspective, then monogamy would be about a pair of mating adults that breed and stay together for lifetime. And so that application really doesn't apply to most modern adults these days. We at the very least make space for serial monogamy, and we also understand that sometimes we are adhering to monogamy as the picture that we're living, but there's also cheating going on. So there's non-monogamous behavior, but the monogamous
within
front
the context
piece
of monogamy,
right? So really, what we're talking about here is the default expectation that unless you announce something different, you will do monogamy. You will adhere to it. You will live it yourself. You will prioritize it, and you will prioritize it as the standard and the norm for yourself and for others. And that in itself, that's where I start to itch, because I'm like, ooh, anything that is a default understanding that everyone will do immediately casts some people into a marginalized position. So, ick. I'm not loving that.
Yeah, and what you just said about the default expectation is that, like, if I meet a stranger, I should assume they're monogamous. The culture says, assume they're monogamous. That's the starting point. And what I find interesting about that is that that means that if I'm non-monogamous, it is somehow my responsibility to tell everybody so that they don't assume the default. But that also assumes that there's just two ways. Yeah,
Right. Yeah,
yeah,
as if there's not actually a plethora of ways for people to relate, and defining everything, monogamy or non-monogamy really then still centers monogamy. So
yeah,
monogamy is at the center of that
yeah,
imagination, and where we center our imagination will impact everything in our life, whether we
yeah.
think it does or not.
It's one of the reasons the word non-monogamy is not always used. People use other words that
Like
don't,
polyamory.
like polyamory, because non-monogamy continues to center monogamy as a default.
Right.
Yeah.
So there are so many reasons. And depending on how long you've been exploring this, you may have heard, almost nothing about default monogamy. You might be like just at the beginning of your journey and really be like, wait, I just thought that's what everybody did. Wait, I didn't do anything wrong. No, you didn't. That is exactly what is the creation of a cultural norm. You don't know until you know. And then once that blindfold is off and you're looking at your world around you differently, once you've heard the words non-monogamy, polyamory, open relationships, and especially once you've started seeing real representation of that, media representation or
Hmm.
helps,
Hmm.
but like once you realize like, oh, that's my cousin, that's my
Yeah.
coworker, that's my neighbor, or that's me. Once you
Yeah.
start
Not just
really feeling it,
media representation, but your actual personal community.
that moment is, from my perspective, it's a tipping point. It's an inflection point in our lives for many of us, because what happens is up until that point that we recognize not just that open relationships exist in some faraway land, like, or in a
Hmm.
1960s key party, but oh, real people, just regular, like somebody that I see across from me on the soccer field, like cheering on the other team. Well, it's just those people. So some of those people are non-monogamous. And so, in order to talk about coming out, I think we need to center this idea of, right, remember, we all have to unpack the what we walked in with. And that's going to be different for everyone, but we are living in a culture of default and even compulsory monogamy.
Hmm.
Um, Compulsory monogamy it's a related concept, and it can be really helpful for people who are, maybe you realized at some point that you are non-monogamous, like that you've always had an ability to connect with multiple people, that feels really good for you, and you start incorporating that, but you find yourself sort of frustrated with having made a whole bunch of like choices. Theoretically, they were choices, like to partner with one person, to agree to monogamy, to get married and create a particular kind of life with two people, like, and having children, all those things. And at some point in your life, maybe you're 28 or 38 or 48 or 78, like whatever, and you're like, oh, actually, I'm non monogamous, but I did all the things
Hmm.
of monogamy.
Yeah. And
And
that compulsory isn't
we,
just somebody saying you should do it this way. It's also the fact that so many of our legal and social systems are set up to only support monogamy. So it's not so much that somebody's saying you can't do it another way, as there are so many hurdles to doing it
right.
another way that the end result is you're kind of highly encouraged to this particular
Right.
relationship
So
style.
Angela Wiley wrote beautifully about this. Gosh, over a decade ago. There are some. I'll link some great academic papers about the idea of compulsory monogamy. Elizabeth Emmons wrote this amazing legal paper about what what do we have to do in order to not just assume that
Yep.
monogamy is the way, and therefore we follow that path. And compulsory monogamy can lead. I know it led me to realize, like, oh, I did so many pieces of my first adulthood because I didn't know that there were any other
Yep.
options, or I thought
Yeah.
those other options were bad. I thought they were morally incorrect.
Yep.
All of that, all of that explanation is to say, if you are showing up sometime during your midlife and you're like, okay, now I'm embracing non-monogamy as my relationship structure, whether that's polyamory, an open relationship, whether you're swinging, whatever form it's taking, um, there's some stuff to get in and unpack, including how you got here and possibly some grieving to do. We're going to do a separate episode on grieving, but grieving the life that you might have had if you'd known about this, or if you had
Right.
understood, or if you'd even just had the privilege, because it does take a level of awareness and then a level of privilege to do things that are outside of the default, outside of what our tax code sort of compels.
Right.
So I think, Ken, we should talk about a little bit about the what it's like to live in a socially monogamous relationship, the good, the bad, the ugly.
So that would be one where you are engaging in non-monogamy and polyamory and some other relationship style than monogamy, but you behave and act in public in a way that supports the idea that you are monogamous.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And so I use the term social monogamy, and I know that like there are scientific fields that, like, if we get into like again, back to zoology, we could talk about social monogamy, but I think it's a great phrase to describe how, you certainly lived in a long-term
Mm-hmm.
marriage
Yep.
where there was an illusion of monogamy, but the practice of monogamy was not what was agreed to.
Yep.
And I imagine that there were lots of reasons why you did that, but I'm curious from the vantage point you have now, how did you wind up there?
Here's the very first, what immediately pops to mind when you ask that question. It's easier. It's just easier. Like, then if I had not maintained the illusion, which was mostly about not opening the door to conversations, then I didn't have to have those conversations. Those conversations were going to be hard. I wasn't ready for them. I hadn't really thought about it other than this is how I want to do it. And I could imagine how people would talk to me, would ask questions, would interrogate. Like, so what's going on here? And I hadn't thought about it, and I didn't want to think about it. So that the very first level is, it was simpler for my social relationships to just not enter into that conversation. It's not something that I feel is simple now, because in retrospect, I can see how not having those conversations diminished those relationships a lot. So it was a choice not to have deeper relationships with people.
So, and not just the people I think you're not just talking about the other people that you were partnered with, but other people who might have been curious about who you actually were.
Yep. Right.
Like your family, your friends,
yeah.
your community, who might have been interested to know how you actually lived your life.
Yep. I think about the people that I've known throughout my life. There are, I just heard from somebody today after a few years, and we've known each other since we were 20. And I've never said anything to him about it, but we have this lifelong relationship. So yeah, the decision not to discuss my relationship choices interferes with my ability to show up as an authentic person in my relationships. So that illusion spreads out. It's not just the illusion of monogamy. It's the illusion of who I am as a person. Yeah, which I think maybe we can just touch on the fact that interacts as well with your queerness. Because you're a bisexual man, and like the bi erasure is a very real thing, and so there's another element of your identity that basically, because you're married to me and I present femme, if you want to be known as bisexual, you're like constantly having to out yourself to people who tend to see you with just me. I have the same experience. Which I could have the same experience with polyamory too. Yep. Because I don't date all that much. So it's like, I'm polyamorous. Oh yeah, well, what do you have for other partners? Nothing really right now. But you're with her and you're married, and so are you really? And then, which then gets into people asking you to tell them how slutty I am in order to verify your non-monogamy. Right. Nice. Yeah. Okay.
It's and I don't mind that. I really don't, but it's not actually the measure.
It's
Like
not the measure.
your behavior is not the measure of whether you are polyamorous.
Yep.
Your behavior is not. I mean, sometimes I have one partner because I happen to be married to you, and so you stick around. But I'm really not like fit for human company, and I choose not to date because I am either busy doing other things or really just not interested.
Yep.
Just not interested. And that doesn't make me less polyamorous during those times. Or sometimes there's, outside influences like global pandemics that
For example, yep.
interfered with relationships.
Logistical issues.
Back to when you're making the choice, I'm hearing from that simplicity perspective of like, okay, we're non-monogamous, but it would just be easier not to have all those conversations. So you just don't really mention it. But there's also a level of like there's no, I don't entitlement like to
Yeah.
you also didn't entitlement as actually protective. I feel like I witnessed you back then experiencing a sort of hey, it's none of anybody's business. So I don't know anybody any explanation, which is true. You
But it
didn't
is
owe
also,
anybody any explanation.
but the strength of that position for me, it was based on my entitlement.
And the fact that you it also meant that you were requiring the people who like the other people that you were interacting with to uphold your social monogamy.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
And this is where I think it gets really messy because I want to say, yes, absolutely. You get to decide how much privacy you want. And at the exact same time, you got to grapple with what cost does that come at for your other partners? Let's say you partner with somebody and you care about them and you want to interact with them. Are they now your secret? Are there rules around where you can see them, where you can have public displays of affection? Are there rules about whether you can be on each other's social media? I have had people start dating me and remove me from their social media because they don't want any evidence. So they're literally starting to date me and I feel them pull away because they don't want any trail that could trace back to somebody who is outwardly non-monogamous. And it's heartbreaking for me to realize that, or it has been. And I've started to just come to the realization that, yeah, not everybody wants to be with somebody who's out. But there's always something here. If you are in a couplehood and protecting the visual of that couplehood is the top priority, then other people, I mean, they have to be able to consent to that. And in order for them to consent to it, you've got to be able to disclose that early. And then, yeah, stuff changes over time.
Yeah.
So from my perspective, it gets painful and messy pretty fast. And this is why I actually recommend some people consider staying in the swinging realm. Some people really are only interested in sexual connection, and they don't want any kind of public outing. And going to events, being in a swingers environment may actually be a more appropriate choice. I have dated so many people at this point who say, oh yeah, I'm polyamorous, but then they want me to be their secret. They have no willingness to engage with me, like integrating in any way with the rest of their life. That's not how I define polyamory. No, you don't have to have me meet your mom. I understand not everybody's going to tell, like if you have elderly parents and you're like, I am not having this conversation. I get it. Wow. Yeah,
The,
this topic just brings up a lot of big
well,
feelings and I see it go badly so frequently.
And I think that it comes, well, one of the fundamental pieces of this, from my perspective, as someone who did lean into social monogamy back in the day and maintained that illusion, is that I could say this is about privacy. It's nobody else's business. And okay, but privacy has implications. It's not a thing that happens in isolation. Privacy has implications for my relationship with the people that I am maintaining a privacy boundary with. It has implications with the people I'm creating that privacy boundary about. And in retrospect, the consent piece is very, very important,
And very
uh,
challenging.
and very challenging. It's very complicated, no question. But uh, you told me what your experience was of um, being essentially hidden,
Being a secret.
being a
Yeah,
secret. It was not good for your psyche, not good for you.
that's true.
And in retrospect, that should have been a question. Like, all right, so I'm going to start a relationship with you. We are I feel that we have a responsibility to ourselves and to each other to say, so how is this going to show up in the world? Because we
Yeah,
do live in the world and we have existing relationships, and it can be complicated. And this is where the coming out topic comes up.
yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Because it
and
doesn't. It's not clear. It's
Yep.
not like you flick a switch and, oh, I'm out now and everybody knows. It
Right.
is actually a process, and it can be incredibly liberating to actually acknowledge your relationship structures.
Hmm.
And just like it can be liberating to fully acknowledge your orientation, your gender identities. So, you said it ideally it would have been a question, and I think this comes up for a lot of clients where they toward the beginning of a relationship, let's say that they're in an open relationship that they're intending to maintain social monogamy in all spheres, but they open up and now they're having experiences and they may even feel like they're gathering consent. You might be in a situation right now where you're like, yes, so I'm telling people, like, hey, I am maintaining social monogamy. Like, that's the presentation is going to be that we are a monogamous couple. And so all this is on the down low. And they may consent to that. But remember that things shift as we deepen our relationships. So
Yeah.
as I experienced deepening our relationship, well, first off, I wasn't invited in as secondary anything. I was
Right.
invited
You
to be
were.
a
Hmm.
into a partnership with two people. So but later the word secondary was introduced. And another way later can show up is, okay, yeah, we're going to keep this casual. Yes, there's feelings involved, but we're going to, it'll be casual. So we won't really need to announce it to anyone.
Hmm.
And then 6 months go by, or a year goes by, or 3 weeks goes by, and you're like, oh, I'm actually completely head over heels in love. And then you go through some stuff, and even the NRE wears off, the new relationship energy starts to wear off, and you're like, oh, I'm actually more in love than I thought I was. This isn't just obsession. No, I'm in it. Now what? And it is important to say you don't have to do everything all at once, but often the now what comes when one person in a particular relationship conversation is like, now what? Holy shit, I have to consider all of this. But the another might be like, okay, I've been waiting and putting up with this and handling this for
Hmm.
9 months, a year, 3 years. So one person feels like they're at the end of their rope and the other's like, whoa, oh my gosh, I have to figure this out. It puts you at really different places. And it's
Yeah.
going to be really hard to fully empathize with where each other is. And that's why I think considering the cost of social monogamy is a reasonable thing. Considering rather
Yes.
than
Hmm.
just defaulting to, well, it's simpler. Is it?
Yeah.
Is it? Like you don't know yet
Yeah.
whether it's actually simpler given the fact that you may develop complex relationships with people that you want to be able to integrate into your community in some way or to acknowledge, like, why do we get married? We did an episode recently on why do you get married? And when I talk to people who are non-monogamous, the answer almost always boils down to something like, because I wanted to stand up in front of my friends and family and say, I care about this person, I commit to them. So social monogamy means you'll never be able to do that with other people.
And that's
Maintaining that illusion will means you absolutely can't. Think about how that might feel after some time goes by. It's it's worth considering, because this is where, I mean, you and I almost didn't make it for many reasons, but one of them was that we had done so much damage because my having to be a secret, it messed me up for a long time.
And in that sentence is a big part of the problem. We could go on and on about the impacts that secrets have.
Right.
There's a lot of negative impacts of secrets, and I mean,
As well as open secrets, not just
as
secrets, but the ones
yep,
that like everybody knows, but we don't talk about it.
yeah.
Those secrets too.
But you said having to be a secret, so you didn't consent to that. That wasn't your idea. That wasn't what you wanted, and that might even be an oversimplification because, but but by saying having to be a secret, yeah, I think you captured the magnifier that
And
you were brought in and then hidden, and I mean in retrospect I can see it. You're like, wait, what?
the door closed behind me. I
That's
had no
not what
idea.
we said we were gonna
Well,
do.
and it's not even what was within my imagination. And here's where this is super challenging because, so let's use you and I as an example. I think it was outside of your imagination. Correct me if I'm wrong, that we would ever be out and share all the details. That, like, because you weren't out about anything in your life. You
That
were
is
incredibly
accurate.
quiet and
Hmm.
private. So you weren't. So your default assumptions were, well, it would be nobody's business, so we'll just never talk about it. And even if people make assumptions, well, we'll just not talk about it and people will have to not talk about it around us.
Yeah.
And my default way of living, and you had known me a long time at this point, my default way of living was to announce my way of being loudly and frequently and in living color constantly.
Right.
Like, that was just my way of doing everything. So it's ironic that we partnered and didn't go like, well, wait, what do I know about this person? They're probably still going to be like that.
Yeah.
But I
Yep.
see it all happen all the time where I imagined, because of my perspective, like, well, of course we'll tell people. I don't hide my life. You
Yeah.
imagined, of course we won't tell anyone because that's how I live my life. And it's about not even knowing that you need to have the conversation. And
Yes.
that's what this
Totally.
episode is really meant to
Hmm.
inspire, is having this conversation and being grown up enough to share with people. If you are expecting them to be a secret, be a grown up. Tell them. Let them say, that
Yep.
won't work for me.
Yeah.
Thank you, but no thank you. And do it early. I I've had many relationships end before the month mark because I ask someone, they assure me that they're ready to be open, and then, you know, a few weeks go by and I can already feel how, like, oh, I'm being hidden. This is a secret. And the secrecy may even be part of what makes it luscious for
Yeah.
you.
Right.
And I grant you, you get to have that kink, you get to be interested in it, but I'm not obligated to play that role. And it's not healthy for me personally. Um, there's another piece of this we should talk about, which is, maintaining this default of monogamy. It maintains mononorms.
Yes.
It
Hmm.
continues to keep the system, so that
It
that very
propagates them.
thing,
Yeah.
right? The very thing that makes you nervous to come out is the default compulsory monogamy, and then you
And
keep you keep adding bricks to that wall
every
yourself. So,
time that is not said, it strengthens the position that it shouldn't be said.
right, and this is where we have to do the challenging work of, like, yeah, who do I want to be and where do I want to spend my energy? And I've had a lot of people um, say to me, well, your coming out impacted your kids. So you shouldn't have. And we just had a conversation, another episode with one of our adult children. And I was glad to find out that at least that one of our children was happy to not have been lied to not have had a facade around them. But in any case, I made decisions the entire time from the day I started being a parent. I've, gosh, 25 years if we count my pregnancy, 25 years of every decision I make impacts my children. my decision to share or withhold my relationship structures, yep, it's going to impact my children just like everything else I do in my life. And so I actually don't think it would have been fair to the kids to say, because I have children, I have to hide. I think that's actually asking like
That's
the
putting something
existence
on
of
them that,
kids
yeah,
to like, yeah. And so just like asking, I don't like to use my kids as a reason or an excuse. They are a part of how I factor my decisions. Um, and I don't want to ask their existence to hold up my reasoning. That makes me incredibly uncomfortable. Um, so there are lists here of things to consider when you're thinking about coming out. I think let's take coming out into a separate conversation.
mhm,
We just broke down why you might want to break away from social monogamy, why you might want to reconsider the idea that, well, that'll just be easier and that'll be simpler. And before we finish, so let's have coming out in another separate conversation.
agreed,
So
yeah.
it'll come out right after this one, I promise.
And I think
And
it's been very important to say, yeah, let's talk about this. Bring this conversation up. If you're participating in polyamory, open relationships, anything other than non-monogamy, um, that it's pretty important for you and for the other people practicing other relationship uh, styles to at least have the conversation with your partners about how you're going to present this to
yeah,
the world.
what
The
what is the reality that you're presenting?
reality you're presenting.
And I think as we wrap up, just also thinking about through, sometimes people say, "Well, I'm not ready to come out because I don't know if this is what I'm doing, really. I don't know if
Mhm.
I'm really doing it. I'm just exploring right now." So, I I could imagine that feeling very like being a very authentic position, and at the same time, it could turn into months, turns into years, turns into decades of like, well, so I'm a big fan of using actual tools and scheduling to help us revisit things. So let's say
Yeah.
you are in an experimental phase, you're still figuring it out. Um, it's not that I would tell you like, oh, you got to come out right now. It's, well, can you reconsider this? Can you put this on your calendar to quite literally revisit this in 3 months and see how are you feeling? What conversations are needed in your life now, and how has the experience of having more partners or being out in the non-monogamous world or just interacting with other non-monogamous people and saying
Yeah.
like, oh, you know what, I count this my community regardless of how many partners I have. How has that changed what labels you want to use and how you want to describe yourself? um, we haven't talked about the downsides, the negatives, the challenges. So let's also mention the reality of discrimination.
Right.
It is real. So when we talk about coming out, we'll get deeper into why someone might choose to come out in different areas of their life and what some of the potential issues are. But yeah, I think this was a great way to kick off this conversation. Thanks,
Yeah.
Ken.
Thank you.
There's no one right way to design your relationship. And lots of people, actually about 25%, according to a recent national survey, are interested in some type of open relationship. But how do you know if you are ready to open up happily? Not everyone is, and that's no problem. I've got a 60-second quiz that will give you the answer. And even better, you'll walk away with your next step, whether you're good to go or not so much when it comes to opening up. And this is no BuzzFeed nonsense. I personally designed this quiz from my years of academic research. Go to joliequiz.com. That's JOLIQUIZ.com and find out if you're ready to open up happily and what to do if you are or if you're not.